think it's safe to say that Final Fantasy XIV is the most important Final Fantasy game ever. Now, the word important is kind of a vague word, it's kind of a vague statement, but I think a lot of people who know it would agree, and at the very least I can say that Final Fantasy XIV is factually the most profitable Final Fantasy game ever. Now, why is that? Final Fantasy has, numerically anyway, they're up to Final Fantasy XVI now, and when you take into account side games, re-releases, mobile games, I'd bet good money there's at least 100 Final Fantasy games out there. So why is Final Fantasy XIV so important? Well, it has to do with the fact that Final Fantasy XIV is very unique in that it is actually an MMORPG that is still going on to this day. Yeah, it was released in August of 2013, so exactly 11 years ago, and it is still going. I don't know what the statistic is today, but I know that in 2021 it was recorded that they had 24 million registered players. So that is why it is extremely concerning to Final Fantasy fans, and of course Square Enix, when you hear that Final Fantasy XIV has been under DDoS attacks pretty consistently now ever since the start of the summer, and now just recently over the weekend from Friday to Saturday, they were a victim of another wave of pretty big DDoS attacks. Now, DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Service. Basically, these attacks, thankfully, they don't, from what I can see anyway, steal any information or accounts from players of the game. We've seen stuff like ransomware attacks in recent times. Those attacks are extremely scary. But with DDoS attacks, it's more about just bringing the game offline, or at least putting stress on the servers of these MMORPG games. So yeah, I didn't know that Final Fantasy XIV was struggling so much recently with these attacks, but it's important to note that just last month they released an expansion pack called Dawntrail that obviously brought in a lot heavier traffic to the game than what they would usually experience, and that's still going on, so that's why it's very concerning that these DDoS attacks keep happening. And of course now just recently, well, with it happening this weekend, yeah, it's kind of confirmation that these attacks are not stopping. Now, from what I can see, it's not really clear as to who is doing these attacks, if it's the same person each time, and what their ultimate goal is other than just like troll Square Enix and its players. Now, I'm seeing that thankfully these DDoS attacks, I think they're getting a little bit better from the player's standpoint and Square Enix's standpoint, in that I think they're actually a bit shorter now. It looks like at the start of the summer these attacks would last for hours. Now, this one that just happened over the weekend, it looks like many are reporting that it only lasted for about half an hour. That was Friday night, but then Saturday it looks like had a few other waves of attacks, and then Saturday evening was when these attacks finally completed. Now, this is obviously very stressful. It might be that these attacks are intentionally, from the attacker's standpoint, happening at sort of high traffic times, you know, Friday night, Saturday night. Obviously, it's going to be a lot more people playing the game, but thankfully Square Enix is saying that they are really trying to put a stop to this. It's very clear at this point now that their response time to handling these sort of server attacks, it's getting a lot better, because yeah, the attacks just aren't as long now. But nonetheless, like I said, you know, with over 20 million registered players to this game, and with it being the most profitable Final Fantasy game ever, and pretty much their only live service game, it's very clear that Square Enix knows this is obviously a problem that they really need to get serious about addressing now, and I think they are very serious about it. The reports are showing that the attacks have affected players in North America, Europe, as well as the oceanic regions. It's not just secluded to one part of the world. Clearly, this is an attack on the entire servers of Final Fantasy XIV. So as frustrating as these attacks are, especially for players who, you know, are busy during the week and they kind of dedicate their weekend to play in their favorite MMORPG, it's very frustrating. So I'm glad to hear that Square Enix is really trying to get this figured out. And I really wonder if we'll ever figure out who or what group was responsible for this attack and all of these attacks that have been going on this summer on Final Fantasy XIV's servers, and more importantly maybe, why are they attacking Final Fantasy servers? Maybe we'll never know, but I would love to know.